For those of you who are joining us for the second in this series, we started off, we've got 4 key elements of how do you get more fit digitally and social. And these really are the core foundations of your shape up, which is making sure that you're setting very tangible goals. Zach's going to be our trainer today, teaching us proper technique and how we can really make that content sing, and how we can make those posts much more engaging so that we can pull those leads through the system and encourage engagement. Measuring the progress and making sure you stay motivated. The one thing about digital and social media is it's not a one and done sort of thing. It is an ongoing process, so you have to stay motivated. If you happen to miss the first in the series, it will be available once we finish all 3. The initial one last week was on paid search and social advertising. Today we're talking about how do you integrate social media into your plans, and you'll want to make sure to earmark next week where we're talking about how do you turn your website into a lean, mean, lead gen machine. Quick background about us, GNS Business Communications. We were founded in New York in 1971, so we've been in business more than 45 years, working both the B2B and in the consumer space. Have more than 150 staff, and we've got the availability through our partners of doing in-language, in-time zone, in-country communications in 50 countries around the world. So, Zach, I want to start getting our conversation going here on social media, and I wanted to get your reaction to some of the stats here. Earlier this year, GNS teamed up with Nielsen to look at the attitudes of 2,030 adults age 18 and older on social media. And so we looked at these across the different time frames. The general public, we looked at it from the age range of millennials and Gen Xers, and then opinion elites, who are those who are the most informed and most likely to share opinions and try and influence others. And what I find fascinating about this is nearly 7 in 10 people, regardless of where they fall in the spectrum, think it's important to familiarize themselves with a company before they make a purchase and to familiarize themselves with social media. What does that tell you about how social media is changing our world?
Well, Steve, social media is everywhere. So understanding more about a company and being able to find information about them and their products or services, I mean, this is a high percentage across the board because people are now expecting companies to be social. And when they're not, it can be a letdown. So from a consumer standpoint, I think about looking at specials or how-to tutorials. Where do you go? Most of the time it either starts with Google or social media. So from a brand perspective, this is a key opportunity that you should take advantage of.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is kind of interesting as well is when you look at the percentage of adults who increasingly hear what's going on about companies through social media, for the most part, it's above 50%, and particularly as you look at your millennials and Gen Xers. So social media is definitely here to stay. Wanted to get your reaction to this other bit of research. We had our insights team field a snap poll. I guess it would have been about a week and a half ago on August 2nd of 407 consumers in the U.S. And we asked them how many social media platforms they currently have accounts on. And what I find fascinating is 55% of those surveyed have 3 or more social media platforms. What does that tell you, Zach?
Well, I think back to when Facebook was really just getting started and people were more leery about getting on social media. And as it's evolved, brands starting to have their own presence on it. And then as more and more social platforms evolve, I mean, we even can look back to the poll that we just showed a second ago, Steve. More and more individuals are adding social to everyday life. So this is a key opportunity for brands getting in front of their audience. I also think smartphones and tablets have social profiles preloaded now. So as people are adopting more cell phone technology and using smartphones, they're more apt to go ahead and get on social media. So what might have been one profile a couple of years ago now is looking like 2, 3, and even 4.
And wearing your corporate comms hat, what does that tell you in terms of the number of media channels a typical company should be on at a minimum?
at a minimum, you should, at a minimum is one. But I think the opportunity lies within doing 2 and 3 because you don't want to miss anyone that's not on one platform over another. So you might have some followers that are on Facebook or some customers on Facebook, but you also might have some opportunity with Instagram. And if you're not on that platform, then you're not getting in front of potential people.
Excellent. Well, I want to hear more about your thoughts as to how you leverage social media content across different platforms, some of the nuances of those. And just one more to get your reaction to as we get started here. Earlier this year, the Content Marketing Institute did a polling of 341 content marketers in the U.S., really asking what their attitudes were towards interactive content. And interactive content being things like infographics, self-assessment, quizzes, report cards, you name it, those type of things. And what I found interesting in here was that basically 4 in 5, or about 81% of the respondents, said that interactive content was more effective in grabbing readers' attention. But what I think is very interesting about this is you look just right below that in the second and third columns, nearly 80% of these respondents said it's not just good for grabbing attention, but the value is that it can be reused in multiple format. It encourages repeat visits, and that with interactive content is combined with more traditional content marketing, it can really strengthen the company's message and lead generation. So is that similar to what you're seeing with your social media team there, Zach?
It is, and in fact, we'll hit on it a little bit later in this session, Steve, but having an infographic, for example, that used to be one piece of content. You post your infographic and you're done. But what we're finding now are ways to break up the content and tell many different stories. So you're really finding it as reusable and allowing people to find different angles and linking back to a page more than one time. So really getting more value out of the content. And I think, also notice the retention message. As you continue to reinforce your message across different platforms, you're really familiarizing your brand and whatever you're trying to get across with followers. So having it outside of just social media, if this is part of a traditional tactic or traditional campaign, and then supplementing a social media strategy on top of it, reinforcing some of those similar graphics and that branding, that's going to help people become more familiar with what you're selling and what you're trying to put in front of them.
Great. Well, I'm going to be excited to hear you tell us really how do you build out that experience. I just want to remind all of those on this webinar, you can ask questions at any time in that Q&A box, and we are assembling those for discussion throughout today's webinar. So building on what we were talking about, Zach, just what are the steps for building that experience, and what do corporate communicators need to know about that?
Well, I think building the experience really starts with 3 main areas. There's 3 areas for opportunity. You've got events, graphics, and promoted content. And yeah, you should outline goals and objectives and make sure that you're measuring regularly to make adjustments for optimal performance. But these are 3 areas that brands can either miss the mark or they can stand completely apart. So for events, making social media assets and activities visible to attendees is crucial to success. I'll go over things that we do here at GNS for our clients that help elevate their presence and drive engagement. And when we look at graphics and multimedia content, these are things that are no longer focused to YouTube, Instagram, or even Vimeo. Just about every platform out there has incorporated image upload, filter options, video uploading, and editing functionalities for users. And this is because user behavior leans towards graphics grabbing the attention, like we were talking about earlier. So we've got a few tricks that we can add to make life simple when you're adding these types of infographics and graphics to your content strategy. And then finally, what I'll hit on is some promoted content. And Jerry touched on this last week in her webinar. It was a big part of her webinar, actually. But to the everyday user, promoted social media content can look like organic content. So not aligning your content strategies can actually confuse and even frustrate followers or potential customers. So I'll help make sure that the content is aligned and complements the program and doesn't distract. So as we begin shaping up our social media strategy, events, this is a huge opportunity. And you're right in front of potential influencers, customers, and even brand advocates. So as we get started in this section, I want to start out with a poll that asks you all, where have you seen brands promoting their hashtags? We've got these three areas, and of course we have the fourth, which is you haven't noticed anything at all. But when we look at events, you've got trade shows, conferences, even types of grand opening events. In advertising, we can look at television spots, magazine ads, even just regular television shows. And then you've also got on products and packaging. So as you think about where you've seen hashtags, where you've seen Twitter handles or Facebook icons, where are you seeing these?
We got the results starting to come in, Zach, so we'll just give this a few more seconds for everybody to have the opportunity to vote. You know, for our webinar here, since it was invite only, we didn't use a hashtag in this case because it's educational in nature. But if you did use a hashtag, what would you have used?
I thought about that quite a bit, and I think the hashtag that summarizes what we're doing here today is really social shape up. So I would have done hashtag social shape up, and that would have really aggregated our conversation here.
That's great. Well, I'm going to close the poll out now. I think the good news is that none of our attendees have not seen hashtags promoted at some point in time. Not surprisingly, the number one place they've seen it has been at events. Somewhere right around 95%, about 78 to 79% on advertising. The number on products and packaging is actually higher than I was expecting, about 42%. Anything in these findings surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I think, you know, even right there in the advertising side of it, that makes a lot of sense because a lot of brands are just really incorporating this across the board. This is not, social media branding isn't just for social media. It's helping people find you. And so the fact that our team here and that the group on this call has noticed that in advertising is definitely good. I'm actually really glad that no one's not been noticing it as well.
So Zach, what is the key as we're talking about hashtags and how those get developed? What is the key for creating a really good hashtag?
Thinking it through and making sure that it makes sense. A lot of research needs to go into it as well. The last thing you want to do is have a hashtag that could potentially not be favorable for your brand or for your company. It could be perceived as insensitive. So really not to bring a pessimistic approach to it, but really thinking through all of the what could go wrong with this hashtag, and then making sure that what you finally selected and what you settled down with is a true connection to an overarching campaign, and having a promotional budget and a campaign to support the promoting of your hashtag so people know how to use it and know how to engage with it. Those are the key takeaways.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. So now that we've wrapped up the poll, I'll get more into specifically about what about events we can do in order to make sure that we're showing a lot of success and growth. So looking more closely at events, this is a key opportunity. This is a key area to build followers, to engage with your audience and then other influencers, and also have fun. As a brand, it's not every day that you can always have fun. So when you're doing something like an event, this is the place to really show some lighthearted fun and good sides of your personality. And social media has become a standard across all types of events, from conferences and fundraisers, trade shows, festivals, even open house events and grand openings. Every post on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or other platform generates data that planners can use to better understand and improve the attendee experience. So this is even more reason to make social media an easy experience for attendees. Now, in order to have successful execution from a trade show, you've got to have planning. Even when you're not thinking about social media, you don't just show up at a trade show and say, okay, I'm here, I'm going to throw some papers on a table and be good to go. Well, you definitely shouldn't bring that approach to planning your social media either. I can't stress it enough. Inevitably, there are events that do creep up, and the next thing you know, your team is in frantic mode. But an ideal situation would have you planning for your event upwards of 3 months out. This time allows you to brainstorm and develop a concept, integrate it into your setup, and promote your presence adequately. You can do it in less time, but I've seen that 3 months should afford plenty of time to incorporate a lot of the graphics and the brandings that would be necessary in order to do real effective social media planning.
So Zach, if
Sure.
you've done all this planning, what do you do if you find out that somebody else is using the same or a very similar hashtag? How does that impact the planning?
Well, if someone else is using the same hashtag, you need to look and see how recently they used it. Was it something that was a one-off event for them and it's kind of dead in the water, so there's opportunity for you to pick it back up? If it's similar, are your messaging, are they competing against each other? If it's still an active conversation, are they competing, and could it be confusing? Because you don't want anything to be confusing, and that's definitely a key takeaway for all of this, is making sure that whatever we do doesn't confuse users. And then if it's you find that it's just the exact same as someone else is doing it, and it's still an active conversation, if you don't want to compete with someone else, then maybe look at what you can do to switch your messaging. Because a lot of times if you look at some talking points and some key brand outlines, you can find something else that can connect with the user and create a social hashtag around that message as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and that's a good approach to lead into where I was going next with it, Steve. So when it comes to getting content in shape, creating an experience guide, and we call this a one-sheet or even just an event guide, having all the details for the event outline, including the location, any social media hashtags that the event is using or that you're using, any handles or planned content is what should be included in this experience guide. So some content can be scheduled into a system like Hootsuite in advance, so you don't have to worry about it. You know you're going to be doing this at this particular time, so you can go ahead and add some of this content to the schedule. But when you've got content that's live, and to emphasize that fun side of the event, you want to get out and show what's going on. So that requires you to get pictures that are live or videos. So having a content outline so you know what you should be getting, where and when to tweet it, or even post to any other platform is going to be good to help make the process as smooth as possible.
So you're saying you shouldn't just show up with an iPhone and start tweeting?
No, not at all. And from experience, I can tell you it's a lot more stressful to show up without much of a plan behind you. Definitely come with something outlined, even if it's just a quick little guide of be here, be there. At least you know where you're going, so you're not frantically running around.
Hey, Zach, we have a question that came into the Q&A pool asking about, as you're doing that show plan, do you typically incorporate legal review in that to give you kind of the framework or the lay of the land?
If necessary, yes, you can. So legal review, some companies require legal review before any content is posted. Other companies have their key talking points, and unless you're diving into a more specific area, then you don't need to have legal review. Being careful about how you're taking pictures, maybe not taking pictures of children, or not focusing on one individual person without their knowledge or consent. Avoid that. But with all those things in mind, you might want to have just someone from your legal team review your plan, or at least know that you're going to an event and that you will be tweeting.
So we've got a broad range of senior communicators here that have registered for this webinar. How do you help break the cycle of social media being seen as an afterthought? Once you get all the other elements of an event put together, oh yeah, we need to do some social media. How do you help break that cycle and make sure when you're talking about having your plan be 3 months out, the messaging, those aspects, what do these communicators need to do to help their organizations realize the value of the social media plan as a core part of that event and not an afterthought?
Well, I think you said it right there, Steve, just to not think of it like an afterthought. If you're going to go ahead and, if you want to do social media at an event, go ahead and when you're having your event planning, your first initial brainstorming meetings about what you want to do at this event, or how you want to execute it, or thoughts about maybe what type of event we are going to be doing. go ahead and bring your social media person in, because they can help shape and guide a lot of where you're going with some of the promotions and with some of the angles. We've had some opportunities to even shape what conversations are happening at an event by just being in a planning meeting in one of the first planning meetings. So breaking the cycle just really requires you to reach out and force yourself to include that individual in those meetings early on.
Great, thank you.
So another one of the elements when it comes to social media events is making branding visible. So this is where having some advanced planning and time will make a big impact. If you can develop banners with your hashtag, create a landing page on a website that talks about what you've got going on in your booth, create additional signage around the event, that will tell people how they can engage with you, making for an interactive experience. You can see examples here on this page, on this slide, of how State Farm incorporated signage that was very visible, so attendees knew how to engage with them from the show. And a cool side note about this is Here to Help campaign that they're promoting. It's a full campaign, so while the trade show was the practical ways of helping people at the show, like cell phone chargers, relax stations, water, etc., the ongoing campaign hits on how State Farm helps throughout all the tough moments in life. So this is a great example of integrating a campaign to incorporate social media at a show, as well as expanding the audience reach to really encourage more interaction around a hashtag. Another way that we encourage interactive interaction with our audience is by incorporating digital elements into our booth. App or web-based programs like Walrus allow companies to integrate social media onto screens or even through projections. This allows to share information about specific activities and promotions, as well as showcase tweets or Instagram posts from your event. The best part of this is when you're sitting in an event and you're actually watching people, they're sitting there waiting for the actual tweets to appear on the screen. So the example on these slides shows how Keel's incorporated both branding elements for how you can engage, and then showcases some of the posts on their feed on that same board. So this is an example of what it would all look like if you were to incorporate both Twitter and Instagram. And one of the cool things about these platforms is that they can either allow you to filter what's coming through or approve, or you can just have everything come in live. So if you've got something that's a little more of a sensitive topic and you want to make sure that someone's looking at it before it goes live and broad across a full audience, you can filter that, and you can cut that out.
Mm-hmm. So would you filter for keywords, or would you just have an individual on the team personally reviewing and authorizing things before they went live?
Yeah, it would be a person on the team personally authorizing it. So the downside of that is it takes a little more time and requires maybe another person. So if you're already strapped for content and you're multitasking and doing a lot of things, you might want to go ahead and set just to auto-approve and go out live. But if you really need to be monitoring what people are posting and when they're posting it, and what you want to appear in your booth on this digital board, then having another person handy would make a huge difference and allow you to do that. So, and like we were mentioning earlier, having good branding, these are good examples of how branding can drive engagement. I recommend using polls leading up to the event, and that will enter yourself into the conversation. The content might not be a direct representation of your brand, but you're opening your brand up for more conversational interaction with potential event attendees. So the examples here on this page, you see there's the poll in the bottom, and it's just State Farm asking what the favorite part about Bonnaroo was. And then you can see there's also on the top left, there's a person just capturing a moment from the show. And then the engagement they received from the social media branding on the right side, the person was tweeting that they love State Farm. So this is examples of how people can engage with you.
Zach, you were talking about making sure you have a show plan and those frameworks, but from somebody who's out there actively finding the content at the show once you have the plan, taking pictures, getting comments, how do you do that? Is it easy? Is it hard? What is that actual process of finding that that content and representing that brand at the event so it feels much more natural?
There's a lot of time involved in it. It's not just let me go out real quick and grab a quick photo and tweet it out and now I'm done. You really have to be there for different experiences. So being able to capture what is going on through video and through imagery, and then go back and post it. I mean, you got to think about how you want to say certain things or what makes the most sense in this particular circumstance. So there's definitely a time factor. And another element, just outside of the event, participating in conversations at the event, encouraging people to promote. Steve, something else I wanted to hit on was incorporating these graphics. So we showed earlier how there was big branding elements and signage at a booth, but you don't always have to have large signage in order to encourage that conversation. You can take a small-scale approach and incorporate social branding on your event agenda, in an email and on the invite if you're inviting someone, or even if you get an attendee list, you can send an email out to all the potential attendees and let them know that you're on social media and you hope to engage with them from the show. So there's different ways that you can approach incorporating the branding and really driving some of the conversation from the shows.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So now that we have a better understanding of what the shows are and a few key steps in being able to execute social media from a trade show, we're going to hit on some of the graphics and the animations that make content pop.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting as we get into this one, Zach, is that same GNS Snap poll we did on August 12th that found that more than 55% of the respondents are on more than 3 social media platforms. We asked them to rank what types of content would they be most likely to engage, to click, to go deeper. And, not surprisingly, but it is interesting. The clear number one was posts with photos. The clear loser, per se, was posts with text only. And then in between, you had this gradient of videos, GIFs, illustrations, things like that. So I guess a couple of things. Does that mean if you just put a photo in everything that you'll get better engagement?
I wish. No, it really doesn't. But having some sort of graphic usually does help set you apart. But we continue to see platforms opening up functionality, and so they're opening up the ability to apply filters, extending video links, the ability to add images and text on images. And this is because these platforms are visual and user behavior is demanding visual simulation in order to connect. So making sure graphics are connecting to your message, that they're enhancing your content and not distracting, and that they fit appropriately are those big watch outs because, like you said, it's not just about posting a photo. It's about making sure that whatever photo that you are adding is really supplementing and complementing the content of what you're posting about.
That makes sense. And if we go back to that Content Marketing Institute research, if you do it right, and I'm assuming you can leverage it and reuse it across more than just one post.
That's right, you can. So as we look at using and incorporating more of the graphics, there's 3 tips that I have, and I want to focus on for today's purposes. The first one, don't use too much text in your images because ultimately people won't be able to see it. The text is that it can get really overwhelming really quickly. The point of using visuals is to let the colors, the shapes, and textures do the heavy lifting. So whether you're making a visual post for Twitter, for Facebook, or Pinterest, don't allow the words to crowd your image. The examples on this page, I wanted to point out the American Express on the left. Whenever we're working with the creative team and developing a graphic that's going to have content on it, we like to center the focal image. And the reason we center it is because, the center graphics and the text. And the reason we center it is because sometimes when you open it up on a mobile device, the text can get caught. It can get cut off on the left or on the right-hand side. So when you center it, you reduce the chances of losing any of your messaging. However, USA Today here, it's part of their strategy to incorporate quotes from their stories in their images and their graphics. So we see lots of examples of quote images being used where people will have a picture and then put a small quote over it. But this is a different approach, and technically this is a lot of text on a screen, on a page, But as part of their overall strategy, I do think it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was looking at that as you showed it, it almost seemed like they could have made it even punchier, talking about it's traumatic to be out late with your friends in a foreign country, ... And have a stranger point a gun at you, to your point. That, I think, would grab you much quicker because right or wrong, people's attention span or ability to read deeper is not what it used to be.
No, it's not. But I also like how they connected the Ryan Lochte sticks to his story and his apology on social media. What they're putting in their image is not exactly what they're putting in their post content. They're telling more of an overall story by using two pieces. So something you want to avoid is saying the same thing on both areas. So you don't want to say the same thing in the post that you say in the image.
And what is your thought of, if you look at this, they've got the USA Today logo in the upper left-hand corner, so basically what would be the equivalent of where you and I may put the profile image, but then they also have that bit of branding in that content. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that overkill? What is your feeling on how much is too much branding within a single post?
I think it's good to have some branding in a post. I do think that, not everyone would notice the avatar there right next to their USA Today name as much as they would notice the image. But so if someone were to pick up that image and use it on another platform or share it, at least USA Today is going to continually get the credit for that image. So I would be careful and watching out because some brands have so much branding around their logo that it doesn't necessarily always fit the social media specs and can kind of distract from the actual goal of the image. So make sure that you're sizing it down. It's a small little accent piece. The focal point here isn't always that you want to have your logo in big and bold.
Great, thanks.
And an example of that, and I actually think it kind of works in this case, but Cam Raleigh was using this in both of these events here, both of these pages here incorporated their logo on these images. But the real point of this particular slide is to focus on the use of stock photography. So with platforms needing to have more and more images involved, where do you get these from? You can't literally go out and take pictures every day and post it. Sometimes you actually need to create something. So just keep a watch out for using stock photography. And when you're using that stock photography, it is a good idea to include your branding or your logo larger on it because that's going to focus the point and make people know that, okay, this is Cam or this is Eventbrite. But then also connecting it to your message is going to be key. So making sure you're not using a random stock photo, but that your stock photo is actually in line with what you're saying in your post.
So a lot of the communicators on this line are used to stock photo in terms of sourcing for specific items, invitations, collateral, those type of things. But when you're talking social media, it's global. How do you ensure that you have the correct rights of usage for these images?
Just make sure that when you're buying the rights to the image that you're buying full right usage, full rights. You don't want to buy any kind of limited or editorial only. You want to have the full rights, and that way you won't run into any issues in the future.
Great, thank you.
So another example here is a final touch point for what I wanted to hit on is just incorporating the variety. So we've shown how using stock photography, you can use it certain ways. We've shown using quote images, but something else you want to use is animations, infographics, jazz up a photo and get more of your message. You see Amazon here did lightning deal and put a little puppy, something that was cute. Not every brand can get away with a cutesy post, but a lot of times we can, more so than we think. So, but the key point here is that all of these different things are different varieties, and these are all things that we can be implementing in our social media strategy. So, looking at social media posts themselves, we want to use the post to ultimately link to an article and tell a story. You don't want it to be a completely different graphic because then you could actually end up confusing your readers. So on this example, we see how these two slides The story is that there's an artist story and there's this person, Cam, and when you get to the landing page, that same imagery appears. But not only just with this one story, the graphics remain consistent through the entire content series. So what we're able to do is use some of this branding to tell a story. And what I thought was really interesting with what they did with this artist stories is they actually used artist stories as one hashtag to then promote another campaign, like a cause marketing campaign of being a good neighbor. So you can actually tell more of a story and connect your pieces together with these types of graphics.
So how important is having a landing page to drive individuals to, and then how important is it to have that very clear visual tie between the two?
It's extremely important. So if you're doing just a content series where you're just posting content and you're going to hit on these topics at this key time, that's not as important to have a landing page. It is important to have some consistent imagery behind it, or at least graphic treatments done to your image. But when you're doing a campaign and you have a bigger goal in order to drive some sort of an action, it is crucial that your connection, your image connection and your social media is then tying into what the reader is seeing on the landing page, and they can really get an idea of how to fully interact with you.
Yeah, that's an important point. So I think as you're thinking about the social media campaign, you also need to make sure that you have your web team involved as well so that you're getting that consistent tie-through of things.
Yes. Social media content is often misperceived or misconceived that it is just on social media. Many times, a lot of the content that we develop on social media comes as a result of something that was posted on the web, or we get into talking about a potential content outline or a campaign strategy, and next thing you know, we need a web page to drive traffic to. So they really do work hand in hand. Now, another type of graphic that is widely used in social media and is excellent for creating a content series is the infographic. The infographics can be both great and also horribly bad. What you want to avoid is trying to fit an entire infographic into your post. Social platforms have sizing specs that you should use, and the purpose for these specs is to make the content easy to see for readers. So you'll notice on the left side of the screen we have a Do This post. They've taken part of an infographic and sized it to Twitter specs. On the right, we have a brand that just posted the entire graphic. You'll notice the Not That graphic is nearly impossible to read. Now, you might not be able to make out every piece of content on the Do This graphic where it says plan and has the light bulb, but the idea is that it's capturing the attention nonetheless. On the right-hand side, I can't make any of that out. Steve, can you make any of that out?
I probably wouldn't click on that, but I see a lot of that out there in social media posts, and people take content and just put it out there. So I guess having the proper size for the image is critical. Either that, or I look at that and think, wow, you could probably tease that out into at least 4 to 6 different pieces of content and get the most out of it.
Exactly. That's a miss that the Not That group here did. That was one piece of content, and they could have actually made at least, looking at, from what I can tell, at least 5 or 6 pieces of content to support that. So when we hit on the idea of being able to connect over to a landing page to tell more of your story, this is a great example of that Do This side, how we were able to tie that imagery in from the social message into the landing page on this infographic. And then furthermore, as we talk about shaping the content on the web page, take a look at how they've incorporated this header image. And just a trainer tip, never use just a PDF on an infographic. Always code it into the page and content to it, and add content to explain what the graphic is. It's going to add value to the site and make the experience better for viewers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can't move on to our final session of our training hit without hitting on videos. So video use on social media is growing tremendously, and now just about every platform is supporting it. So you'll want to get the most out of your videos by turning them into a series that will allow you to continue putting that message in front of your audience. The example we have on the screen here originally started out as a single video, but we identified 3 unique angles that we could highlight as a short 30-second teaser without making any additional, well, many additional edits to the original video. What we ended up with was a total of 5 videos, allowing us to create a content series with variety that highlighted performance throughout the season and just instead of having one video. So what we were able to do was avoid having just one upload to YouTube and now we're completely done. We were able to take this and develop an outline for having multiple content to go all season long, really creating 5 different videos, totaling up to more than 15 social media posts for the year. So another trainer tip before we move on, here's some basic platform dimensions to keep in mind. So you can see how each platform has different sizing specs. There's plenty of free editing programs out there that will allow you to resize your images, so I highly recommend that you use them. Or if you have a creative department that can help size them for you, you can do that as well. But
so one size doesn't fit all, huh?
That's exactly it, Steve. One size does not fit all. So what you post on Twitter probably won't work exactly right on Facebook, especially if you start looking at those quoted images. You definitely want to have things like that sized appropriately. Now, if you're using just a standard photo, those will usually work across the board, but this is when we get into brands and adding messaging on content, and this is really when you're really trying to drive some sort of an action. Just know that there are different dimensions.
And we had a question that came in, do you recommend testing photos or images to make sure they'll work across different devices? So how do you typically ensure that? As long as you meet those dimensions, are you good? Or what type of testing protocol should you build in a quality control?
So when I do recommend testing, and testing when it comes into just using regular images or photos isn't as necessary. When you start uploading videos, we do test because sometimes the video quality can diminish. You want to make sure that you're able to get as much of your message in, that the platform doesn't cut you off. But you also really want to test specifically on some of those quote graphics. So if you've got a lot of text on an image, you'll want to upload that to a test account and make sure that it's visible across all platforms and that you're not missing anything or cutting anything off as a result of some of the layout, the design layout.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right, so now for the final set in the social media workout, I want to talk briefly about using promoted and organic content. But first, let's start our final poll. So, have you used or plan to use promoted social in 2017? And Steve, I'm interested in seeing what this group has planned for 2017, because as we look at social media trends and the need to target our audience further, we're seeing more and more brands using promoted content.
Well, but so how do you talk to your clients about integrating promoted content? Because I thought social media was free.
Yeah, social media is definitely not free, but that is definitely, people think it's inexpensive or it's easy or free. Promoted content allows you to target your audience, and if you can target them and reach specific groups, it's definitely worth the investment.
See, one of the things that's interesting here as the poll is getting ready to close out here in a few minutes, Zach, is so we've got about 6% that said no. Interestingly, roughly about 20% of the group says they're not sure, which indicates to me, it would be good maybe if you could talk to the group a little bit about what promoted social content is, organic, and how you do that mix of micro-targeting with getting your message out more broadly.
Sure. So promoted content refers to any content that a person or business pays for to expand the reach or target a specific audience. And this can be referred to as, used interchangeably as sponsored content, promoted content, suggested. The difference in this is that, and organic content is just content that is the exact opposite, and it is not promoted or paid. There are some targeting options that are now there, but it's not at the level or the capabilities of when you look at doing it with the promoted budget.
Mm-hmm.
So here's some examples of what it looks like when we're incorporating some of the promoted content and what it looks like. And what I want to talk to you about is why it's not really an option anymore. The old adage that social media is free has certainly proven itself wrong. So not only do you need to account for the time to develop and implement a social media strategy, now you're having to pay to make sure that content is reaching the right audience. And of course, this is done using the targeting options that are available from the promoted side. So looking at some of these examples that we've got here, you can do so much more now with promoted content. It's more than just promoting your brand or service. You can actually promote a conversation and become trending, which is what we've seen here on the left-hand side of the screen. And just to make sure you're not putting too many weights on the bar, keeping a content calendar will ensure that your content is fluid, balanced, and most importantly, helpful. This is an example on the screen of a basic content calendar. You'll want to include as much as possible, and if it's going out on one of your social platforms, either promoted or organic, rest assured it should be represented here. So knowing what you're publishing, when you're publishing it, and who it's reaching will prevent you from overtraining and exhausting your audience, and that goes for both promoted and organic content. You can actually over-promote your content.
So, Zach, how would you look at, if you're building your calendar and your pacing, how do you deal with social media ambassadors, and how do you integrate them in the master plan, and maybe lag time before they'll repost or retweet? How does that work?
So I set the master calendar first and include where it's being distributed to. So if you were to click on one of these icons on here, you might say this is going to this group or that group of ambassadors. And if you're working with a large ambassador program, you should also keep a second calendar that tracks what messages you're giving to them and when, making sure it aligns with your overall master calendar. So you might have two separate calendars running, but they both work together in order to make sure that your message is really being amplified across the board.
Great, and we're starting to get some good questions coming in, Zach. So we're going to put our trainer through his paces here in just a minute.
All right, well, we've got only one more slide left, so it's perfect timing. One way I wanted to show you guys, the RDU International Airport did a post here, and they are adding a Seattle-Tacoma nonstop to their itineraries. And I thought this was a good example of a post that could be not manipulated, but to be amplified through many different ways. So they started out with just the one post here, but on the right side of the screen, I've outlined a few different ways that they can address this. So by starting with the one post, then you build on by targeting followers in both North Carolina and Washington, highlighting the tourism opportunities in both states. And again, since it's geographic, this can be done on both Facebook and Twitter for targeting. And then you've got the Seattle-Tacoma Airport can post content about the new service to their followers using a broad post, and then target Washington followers using promoted and organic content. And then finally, Raleigh-Durham Airport can post promoted content targeting followers in North Carolina for the current nonstop options, and then tease the upcoming option coming in June of 2017. So these are only a few ways that we can help amplify what seems to be one simple message, but taking that one message and building on. And with that, that leaves us at our recap and our key takeaways. So the best thing, wrapping up our workout, our takeaways, the first thing you want to do is plan, 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 and brand, brand, brand. Help followers engage with you by making it easy. You wouldn't jump into a marathon without a warm-up, so don't do the same with your social media content. Plan it out. Incorporate variety with your graphics and grab their attention once, twice, and again. And then finally, keep the content balanced so you're not promoting every post or blasting your followers. You don't want to tire them out before they even get to the second inning.
So Zach, I've got some questions here. That's certainly good advice about planning and branding and variety. As you talk about image, we got a specific question that says, how come most cheat sheets for social media image sizes say to use 440 by 220 for Twitter?
That's probably the minimum. So we usually start with the maximum, and then from there you can dial it back and dial it down. But the 1024 by 512 is the standard formula to use. So you can go down incrementally from there, but the minimum is probably that 440 number.
Okay. We've got the question that I think a lot of us have dealt with or deal with on a regular standpoint. You know, you talk about these different things that you've shown, but how do you address fears from senior management about negative posts? How do you, the boogeyman's out there, he could hit, so what's your advice on that?
Have a response plan. Know who you will and will not reply to. There are individuals that, say you've got a group of activists or people that you know that are just people that are just stirring up trouble. There's no need to engage with them. Don't give in one day, because we all have those weak moments where it's like you just get fed up with being pestered and that's not right, or you don't understand what's going on. This is actually what it is. But they're not actually trying to get more information out of you. They're trying to incite a response from you. So don't engage with those individuals. But what you can do is focus on the positive responses and when you should be responding.
So technical question, what is more important, image size or load speed?
Load speed. Well, if we're looking at web pages, it would definitely be load speed, so you'd want to have a lower image size. But most platforms also have a maximum size for what they'll allow you to upload, so it does for social media. So it should load at an optimal speed. So for Twitter, you can't upload something more than 5 megabytes. So you won't run into one of those issues where something shouldn't load. But the most important thing really would be to have it sized appropriately for the platform.
And I've got a question here, Zach, going back to one of your earlier slides talking about events. Who should the primary target for your social media be around events such as a trade show? Is it people at the show to get traffic to the booth, or is it people who can't attend the show and wish they were there?
It's a combination of both. So you've got to, especially if you have specific tactics going on in your booth, you want to make sure that people know what's happening there and that they need to come and experience this. On the flip side, you don't want to only post about what's going on in your booth and really start kind of boring your audience. You want to really start integrating some of the perspective of, here's what's happening around our booth and here's what's happening at the show. Wish you were here. And if you bring that approach to it, you really start to get a good content mix that balances both promotional and interactional.
So as we look at some of these constant upgrades that you're seeing on the social media platforms, how do you see something like Facebook Live playing into your social media engagement strategy as a brand?
Facebook Live is a great opportunity. You've got Periscope on Twitter, you've got Facebook Live, even Facebook 360. There are certain opportunities that we can do. Not every situation is going to call for a Facebook Live. You want to make sure that you have a good topic, that it's interesting to the people, that they'll want to watch you, and you also want to make sure it's long enough. Doing a Facebook Live event needs to be long enough for someone to know that you're live and to watch you, but also not so long that they start dropping off and falling.
Okay, here's somebody who's taken repurposing content to heart. Their question is, how often can a company share the same post?
I stray away from sharing the same post itself more than once, which is why I like to find the different angles in one particular element. So when we look at that video that we had published, we found 3 different angles within that video, and we were able to put a different spin on each angle. That led to 4 different videos that could be posted to 3 different platforms. So we took it out of just being able to upload one video to YouTube and did it to where we're uploading a video to YouTube, uploading a video to Twitter, to Facebook, and to Instagram, and then we're able to also link out to a different page. So when you have an infographic, it's really good to look at different parts of the infographic and say, okay, this is our overall message. We're going to pull these 5 elements. And so instead of only posting the one infographic, we're posting 5 different images that are linking back to our full infographic. So you're not actually repurposing the same post. You're twisting it around to actually create some variety. But in the grand scheme of things, not every case is going to be like that. So, I mean, upwards of 2 would be okay if you need to kind of repurpose something, but I would not go beyond 2.
Here's one about the social media ambassadors. We have certain employees who share, like, and retweet everything we post. Should we encourage or discourage this type of behavior?
I think if they are well-informed employees, you should encourage the behavior, but you should also empower them with an outline or with tools to know how they can engage and what is appropriate. A lot of times employees just don't know exactly what is appropriate and then start sharing everything. But if you outline some guidelines and outline what is appropriate and what isn't, then it should make for a good experience for you and for them.
And then last question I have for you here, Zach, has to do with age, which is there's an assumption on the part of senior manager that since the junior staff are digital natives, they should inherently be better on social media and therefore assigns them those channels. What's kind of your take on that?
So they definitely have grown up with more social media, more technology at their fingertips, but they're not always empowered with the strategy and the outlining for the ideas of how to use them. So it's not really that, the younger generation doesn't know how to post or is posting more and so they should be doing it. It's really a matter of, is this person that's posting well-informed? Do they understand our audiences? Do they understand what our goals and objectives are for our social media, and can they help us execute it? So, yes, they might be able to technically do some more things better than some of the older generations, but I think it's also extremely important for older generations to get more with social media because they really have a lot of the business knowledge. And working with the social media experts, together they can create a plan and a strategy that can be executed seamlessly.
Zach, this has been a fascinating hour's worth of discussion on social media and how it plays out. I think, we look at those important points of making sure you've got a good hashtag that you're thinking about the planning, making sure you've got the right kind of content that's visually engaging and ties through. And for those of you who we were not able to get to your questions, we will try and respond once we close down this webinar. Zach's also a great resource, so if you have questions, we can certainly put you in touch with him as well. And then I remind everybody, if you get the opportunity, please join us next week when we come out of the world of social media and we talk about those landing pages and we talk about those load speeds and we talk about how as we capture attention on social media, how we use our websites as lead generation machines, all bulked up and ready to go to build your business. So, Zach, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Steve Halsey, and I thank all of our participants and hope that we see you next week. Thank you very much, and have a great day.